2. Very warm welcome to Councillor Alan Totty, who is subbing for Councillor Shazu Mia. Good evening, Alan. So agenda item 3 is declarations of interest by members. So as always, please use your virtual hand if you want to indicate to speak this evening. So I shall just look to see if we have any members of the committee or indeed any councillor observers who wish to declare any interest. No hands are up. So I shall move swiftly on to agenda item 4, which are the minutes, and I'd usually look for the vice chairman, but could someone kindly, Councillor Totty. Councillor Totty's yellow hand was up.
I'll second, Chair. I would like to propose an amendment, if I may do, Chairman, please. 0OS.86, strategy for enabling business growth and enterprise.
Yes.
In the last paragraph, it says, a member suggested that since 2019, climate emergency had been, etc., etc., etc. And I'd like to propose that we insert Councillor Mia there, please. The reason being that quite often we're asked on the doorstep about what we're doing in council meetings, and there is no proof of what we're doing other than our word. But if it's in the minutes, there is actual proof that we're doing something and we're working hard.
Well, of course, Councillor Mia queried why his name wasn't mentioned, but as colleagues of this committee will be aware, they are not a verbatim note of who says what, where and why. And if we are to start naming individual members on every single point, there will be a lot of members named. And of course, in interpreting your point, Councillor Totty, about if people ask you on the doorstep, of course, if I recall, Councillor Mia, like every other member of the committee's, name will be in the agenda, and the minute recorded will be that was unanimously agreed by all members of the committee. So given that he was there, he will be able to point to that evidence anyway. Look, I don't think that amendment needs to be made, frankly. I don't know whether anybody is going to second that proposal, but I got Councillor Edgington-White next.
I was going to propose or second the minutes being approved, Chairman. I don't wish. I think you've made a very good point about including all the names. That would become laborious, and as it was, as you say, as it was unanimous, then you can point to who was attending the meeting. So I'm not.
That's very helpful, Councillor Onslow.
Thanks. I was just really going to agree with Carl there, because you know, this is a committee. We are working as a committee. We are scrutinising items as a committee. If we start to single out who said what and when, people may be less inclined to say some of the more emotive things, whereas at the moment we act as a committee and we act, sometimes it's not along political lines. So for me, I think that's the point of it being a committee, is that we're all working together to make sure everything's scrutinised. So I'd agree with Khan and with yourself that we shouldn't be now down to recording what every individual person said. You know, this acts as a group, and for me, that's how it should remain.
Okay, so I think that's dealt with that, Councillor Totty. So that hasn't been approved in terms of the proposal. There's no seconder to amend. So would somebody move that they are approved as printed? Thank you, Councillor Edgington-White.
I'll second,
thank you, Councillor Onslow, for seconding. Are we all agreed? If you could just wave at me, that would be helpful. Thank you. For the record, that does appear to be unanimous, unless our committee clerk, Louisa, tells me otherwise. Thank you. Good. And good evening to Vice Chairman, Councillor Sarah Rook, who was here, and now your camera's off, Sarah. So if you want to turn it back on so we can see you. I saw you to wave at me. So
1 second, I'm just straightening my hair.
Oh, I better do mine then. Okie dokie. Good. Right. Agenda item 5. How are we doing? Well, Rhiannon Foxall, our Business Improvement Officer, is about to tell us, and then we'll take questions page by page in the normal way. Good evening, Rhiannon.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This is the usual report for Q4, which covers the 1st of January to the 31st of March. The purposes that we are looking at the moment are planning and housing. Because we're at that point where we're crossing over 2 financial years, you will notice that the planning and the housing report are reported purely from 2020 to 2021, whereas the exception report and the capital projects report are reported from both 2021 and 2021 to 22, just to make sure nothing gets missed. So there's the usual reports, there's the exception report, the detailed report for planning, the detailed report for housing, and the capital projects report, and I'll happily take any questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Questions page by page then. Page 15 first. 16. Councillor Onslow.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rhiannon. It was just really on 16, and it isn't a question, it was just to say, I'm really glad that we've jumped on this and the council have taken some action, because it has gone on long enough, and I don't like it when we just keep letting things slide and then altering the date. So pleased to see we've jumped on that.
Great, thank you. No more questions on 16. Then 17. Anybody? Tracy, your hand's still up. Is it because it hasn't been okay? 18.
Yeah, it's historic. I'll take it off. Thanks, Chair.
Anybody on 18? 19. 20. 21. 22. 23. 24. 25. 26. 27. 28. 29 and 30. No, in which case the questions haven't come flooding in tonight. I suspect they'll do that on the next item. So with that, if there's no other questions, then thank you very much, Rhiannon, and feel free to leave the meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Good. Okay, well, we will move on to agenda item 6, and let me just deal very briefly before I hand over to Dave and Dave with item 7. Representatives from Worcestershire County Council were invited last time, but of course it was Purda, and we were wanting to get the cabinet member with responsibility here together with an officer this evening. But of course, the cabinet members for this cycle have not yet been appointed, and County felt it was appropriate for the relevant member to be here. So that is why they're not here, and they certainly don't mean any discourtesy to this scrutiny committee. But let's then deal with item 6 in isolation then. And welcome to Dave Thrupp and Dave Edwards, who've both been here before. And we, of course, would have liked to have seen them sooner, and no doubt they would have liked to have come sooner. But unfortunately, we had further incidents where duty called in the earlier part of this year. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Dave Thrupp, who's got a presentation, and then Dave Edwards will address us as well, and we'll take questions at the end if I may. So I'll pause and hand over to Dave. Very good evening to you.
Thank you, Chair, and a very good evening to everybody. Thank you for the invitation to come and talk to you tonight. We are, I think, becoming fairly regular attendees, so thanks for the invitation. If whoever is sharing the screen could start, just a couple of slides to show you a little bit of context about what we're talking about tonight.
Let's see. I'm attempting it. So please say if you can see.
Okie dokie. Something's happening, Dave.
Yeah, we can. It's starting, Dave. Yeah, there we
Oh,
are.
fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Lovely. All right, lovely, thanks. So the main purpose tonight is to update you on the latest bout of flooding, which happened in January of this year. It seems a while ago now, but it was January of this year. So just to kind of set the scene and explain what happened, I'm going to give you a little bit of context to what happened and set it in context with some other flood events and the bigger picture as to what appears to be happening with flooding across the piece. Then I'll hand over to Dave, who's just going to talk briefly about our response to it locally within Wyre Forest district area. So next slide, please, Dave. Whenever we talk about our flood events, we always talk about the antecedent conditions, which all that means is what happened in the lead up to the flood event and how wet or otherwise it was, because that has a very significant impact on what happens on the ground. And it's quite interesting, this one, in terms of what happened in January, because the run up to Storm Christoph wasn't particularly dramatic. It was wetter than average autumn and early winter, but you can see from those maps, what those maps show are the rainfall anomaly. So the amount of rainfall, whether or not it was above average or below average, and if it's blue it was above average, and if it was brown it was below average. So you can see in October we had a fairly wet October. That was balanced by a pretty dry November. December itself was broadly average, although fairly wet around our part of the world. And then the next one, Dave, when we came into January itself, you can see if you look at for a particular part of the country is average, so it was slightly above average for some areas, but the other maps you can see there are the weekly rainfall totals. So in fact January started off pretty dry with the oranges and yellows, but then we had Storm Christoph, which came along on around the 20th of the month, which was a single event, a fairly large deluge in a short period of time. Next slide, Dave. And the important thing about Storm Christoph was that it was a very isolated event. It was a storm that came in off the Atlantic and dropped an awful lot of rain over the Welsh mountains, orographic enhancement, as we call it, when that's very moist, warm air pushes against high ground. It drops a lot of rain in a short period of time. And what those dots are, those are all individual rain gauges. Spread across the country, and the black ones are where there was over 4 inches of rain, so quite a lot of rainfall. But you can see that is isolated to the high ground in Wales there, and then the reds are probably up to a couple of inches of rain. But as you get more towards our part of the world and locally, you can see that drops right off to under an inch of rain, and then hardly any at all as you come further east. So compared with some other events that we've seen recently, we've had widespread rainfall over the whole of the country for a long period of time. Storm Christoph was actually quite an isolated event. Next slide. Whenever we have a flood event, we always have a look at how unusual the rainfall events that led up to it were. And we still use, it's getting rather devalued in today's currency, I think, the phrase return period. So how often you would normally expect to see such a rainfall event. And the 4 columns on the right-hand side are the top of the River Severn. So where those black dots were, I was showing you on the previous one, the rain gauges were, that's where the heavy rainfall was. And if you look in the middle of that chart, those are the rainfall return periods. And really the headline there is it wasn't that unusual an event. It was not a particularly extreme event. For most of the locations, it was a 1 in 3, 1 in 4 year, 1 in 4 year event. So nothing particularly out of the ordinary. Next slide. But the impacts that it's resulted in were out of the ordinary, and this is where things start getting quite interesting, and where we are beginning to see things now that we haven't previously seen. So that chart is showing you the top 15 ever recorded levels at those gauge locations, at those river gauge locations. So these are the gauges we've got stuck in the river, which monitor the river levels over a period of time. And Bewdley, we've got 51 years of reliable records, of accurate records, and those are the top 15 ever recorded. And you can see the ones that we're interested here are the yellow ones, because those are the ones that came out of Storm Christoph. So you can see at Bewdley, it was the 3rd highest recorded level on the River Severn at Bewdley, exceeded only by slightly by the one last year. In February 2000, and then by the very big flood of November 2000. So the 3rd highest recorded in Bewdley. Next slide. So these are the kind of stats and all the figures and the data crunching that we do. But I personally think that the thing that highlights that something unusual is going on is what I call the canaries in the coal mine, the stuff that we're seeing on the ground. It is more anecdotal. It probably doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny quite as well, but in my view, it paints quite a stark picture of the stuff that's happening locally. So next slide, Dave. I don't know, people are probably familiar with the boat in Jackfield, nice pub on the side of the river, just downstream of Ironbridge. They record the flood levels there and have done since the late 1920s. So you'd expect this to be a pretty accurate level, to be honest, because I can't see them missing a flood. But you know, the headline there is it got wet 10 times in the 70 years between 1929 and 2000, and it's got wet nearly twice that amount of times in the last 20 years. Next slide. In Hereford, where although gauge records aren't that long lived, there are anecdotal records going back to 1790, and we've recorded 14 really big floods in Hereford city, and those are over 5 metre floods. Very interestingly, of those 14, 6 have been in this millennium since 2000. 4 have been in the last 18 months. And 2 have been since Christmas. So again, you know, quite stark stuff. Next slide. And probably the pin-up, I guess, of the local flooding is the Worcester County Cricket Ground. Whenever we get a flood, it seems to be a magnet for drones and helicopters. Well, Worcester County Cricket Club moved there in 1865. And in the 135 years they were there, up to 2000, there were 5 metre floods at Diglis. And again, 5 metre is a barometer of a very big flood in Worcester. Since 2000, there's been 6 in the last 20 years. So as I say, these things, they don't really stand up to scientific scrutiny, but for me, they paint probably a more stark picture of what we are beginning to see happening on the ground. Last slide, Dave. So in summary, the January flooding was a result of, it was quite large, but not exceptional upland river flooding in Wales. The big rivers were the most affected as a result, clearly as a result of that. And it was almost exclusively driven by water coming down from Wales. The Severn levels were very similar to last February, slightly lower. 3rd highest on record at Bewdley, and top 10 elsewhere in the catchment. Interestingly, there was a lot less impact from smaller rivers and from surface water, and that's reflected in the damage that was done. There were unfortunately around 100 properties flooded, quite a few of which, as we know, were in Bewdley. But that compares with something like 1,000 that were flooded across the Severn catchment in February the year before, and that was largely a function of the smaller rivers and surface water flooding not having the dramatic impact. But well over 1,000 properties protected by our flood defences during that period. And it continues this very concerning trend of very severe flood events over the last few years. So at this point, that's the context. I'll hand over to Dave just to say a few words about the response and what we did as a result. So Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Right, let me just turn that off. There we go. Yeah, so I think it's fair to say, like other Cat 1 responders, since the February 2020 flooding, we've had to get to grips with virtual ways of responding to incidents pretty quickly, really. By the time it came to Storm Christoph in January, we'd had a few practice runs on smaller incidents, not all relating to flooding, of course. But our incident response teams by that time were pretty well versed in working through virtual incident rooms, not dissimilar to this, and managing how we deploy our staff and our assets to sites across the West Midlands with as little face-to-face contact as possible. So it's certainly been challenging, but I think we got to a really good place, and by the time we had the Storm Christoph flooding, things were running smoothly. Of course, we had barriers up, the full suite of barriers up all along Severn, including Bewdley, Sevenside North, Sevenside South, and at Beals Corner. We issued 6 flood warnings, I think, across the Wyre Forest District Council during Storm Christoph in January. And we held a number of flood advisory service teleconferences, they're the teleconferences that we call and chair to update multi-agency partners on what's happening in terms of forecasting with the weather, flood levels, asset deployment, and that's how we all work together. We were also involved in a number of multi-agency tactical coordinating group meetings, and also a number of bronze cell multi-agency groups where we have officers from the relevant partner organisations on the ground to manage situations a bit closer to where they're happening. That's probably about it that I wanted to say in terms of our incident response from January. I'll pause there and invite questions. That's okay.
Thanks, Dave and very helpful presentation. I'm keen that we don't go over old ground, and obviously Dave and you and Lindsay were here in April to talk about the issues for the temporary barriers being compromised. So I don't want to go over everything that we've dealt with already. Just deal with the update, and indeed Storm Christoph that you have advised us in your presentation about, and what we're all familiar with. So with that, we'll take questions, and I've got Councillor Alan Totty first, and then Councillor Khan Edgington White.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me if I am going over old ground, but I'm not as familiar with this presentation that we've had as other people might have been that have been on the committee. What I wanted to know was, is there an update on what work's being done to slow down the flow of water from the Welsh Hills It's well known now that flood management is better than flood prevention, you know, dams and stuff like that, and areas that are openly allowed to flood so that they protect the towns and the cities.
Yeah, happy to indulge you briefly for a comment on that from whichever Dave wants to take it.
Yeah, I'll pick that one. A very good point, and you are absolutely right in terms of catchment management being equally as important as hard flood defences, probably more important than hard flood defences. The River Severn Partnership has been established to start working on this kind of stuff. Clearly, it is difficult and it's long term, because you're talking about the management of not just thousands of acres, but thousands of square miles of catchment in terms of the River Severn catchment, and how each square mile of that is managed has an impact on how fast that water gets to the River Severn and all arrives ultimately at Bewdley. So there are all sorts of issues involved here in terms of policy direction, in terms of agriculture, in terms of the way things work, in terms of incentives. There is a lot going on. The River Severn Partnership is attempting to put some structure and some impetus and some best practice into bringing that about. But it's always going to be a combination of incentive and encouragement, as well as sort of the harder side of enforcement and telling people to do stuff. So yes, it is underway. I think we are probably ahead of most catchments on this because of the evolution of the River Severn Partnership, and Wyre Forest District Council does have a place on that on that board, but it isn't a short-term fix.
Thanks, Dave. Councillor Carn-Edgington White.
Thank you, and good evening to Dave and Dave. The context is very, very handy, very useful. So thank you for that. It does help a lot. Very appreciative that we were updated at a previous meeting about the specific incident at Bell's Corner. Just wanted to check, are you going on then to talk about, now we've got the context, where we're going now on this matter, on barriers and flood alleviation?
Is that a question to me? Sorry, Councillor Edgington White.
It's a question to, have we some more presentation?
No, there's no further presentation tonight. Right. So I think in terms of the scrutiny exercise that we did last year, what we said was we wanted an update overall. So here with the update.
If it's helpful, Chair, Dave can give a quick resume of where we are with it.
Yeah, sure. But there's no, sorry, what I mean, there's no other presentation. Okay, so Dave Edwards, do you want to just pick up on where we are and where we're going?
Yeah, of course. I'm sure you will have seen the ground investigation works in Bewdley that have been ongoing for some time. Pleased to say the ground investigation, as well as the topographic surveys, have now been complete, and that's for both the permanent flood risk management scheme at Beals Corner that we're currently working on, and the investigation into the incident with the temporary flood barriers as well. So those surveys are complete, and work can now get cracking on the permanent scheme, and the investigation can carry on schedule, which is fantastic. During late May, early June, something like that, we are planning on the ecology surveys for the Beals flood scheme, the permanent scheme, I should add. We'll be using those to help with the design, and of course using the results from the surveys to help plan what type of foundations may be appropriate for the permanent scheme. With most, it's probably fair to say with most flood schemes, there's more going on underground than there is that you see above ground, in order to manage the flow pathways that go through the subsoils and what have you. So we'll be using the ground investigation to help us decide what's the best course of action for the foundations that the above ground defences will sit on. We're looking to organise a wider community engagement event in July. So the project team, I'm sure, will be in touch with you to have your thoughts and ideas on how that can be the best success it can be. Hopefully will be restrictions due to the pandemic will be greatly reduced by then. I know we're on the right track for that. But yeah, the project team will be in touch with details about that community engagement event. I mean, it would be fantastic to be able to have something on the ground face to face rather than having to do it virtually. We'll have to see how we go with that. Sorry.
No, go on.
For the temporary barrier post-incident review, which I went through last month with Lindsay, I can just add that is currently on schedule. Lindsay's working very hard on the interpretative reports from the ground investigation and the reporting requirements. And we're hoping to share the results with community and partners in the summer.
That's really helpful, Dave. Councillor Edgerton-White, do you want to come back? And
yeah, if I could just come back briefly, Chair. You picked up on the fact that would have been my question, where we're going now if that wasn't going to be presented as a follow-up. Just thank you very much. We have had some local contact. Beaulieu Town Council, we've had contact with Alex, so you are keeping us in the frame. Just very, very briefly, David, do you think that the context is going to, that you've just presented, is that going to be more helpful in attracting more funding that will be required for the permanent barrier at Bewdley?
I think it will be useful, yes, because we can demonstrate that flood events are becoming more frequent on the Severn. We will be playing that in certainly to the business cases for Bewdley. I guess the counter to it is that this is not a pattern that we're just seeing on the River Severn. You know, it's being driven across the country. So yes, we will be using the context information to promote Bewdley's case, but I suspect that many other similar schemes will also be using similar information.
Thank you.
That's great. Good. Good evening, Councillor Shepherd. We didn't think you're coming, but it's nice to see you. And your yellow hand is up, so fire away.
Okay. First of all, apologies for absent or sorry, late arrival. I've driven up from Cornwall today, 250 miles, towing a caravan, mostly in torrential rain. The bridge over the M50, you know, where the River Severn is, that's already started to flood there, I noticed. Anyway, I just wanted to ask whether there's been any progress regarding the stream that flows into the Severn above Bewdley Bridge. The name comes and goes, and I can't, having just driven 250 miles today, my memory is not too brilliant.
Are we on about Dowles Brook?
Yeah. That's it, yeah, because that was a significant factor for the February floods. And I'm just wondering whether anything can be done to alleviate that, you know, the source of that water coming into the Severn.
Okay.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Thanks,
the answer is yes, and there is an ongoing scheme at the moment. Natural flood management is what we term it, which is using natural processes to slow the flow, because as you rightly point out, this is about knocking that peak off, so it doesn't arrive at the same time as the main peak on the River Severn. So it's about slowing the flow in that smaller water course catchment in the Dells Brook. So there is already a fair bit going on in the particularly in the Wyre Forest in terms of natural flood management. And I'm pleased that Worcestershire County Council, who are the main delivery body there, have put the Wyre Forest forward as part of the extension to the natural flood management programme, which hopefully will be funded through our next 6-year programme. So it should get a longer term funding. And I think the plan there is to come up with a holistic plan for that Dells Brook catchment, because in many ways it's a bit of an upside down catchment. Normally you get the trees at the top of a catchment and the farmland, the intensive farmland at the bottom. With the Dells, you've got quite a lot of intensive agriculture and arable right on the top, and then it comes down through the forest at the bottom. And it's important we take into account that the nature of the catchment there in terms of what we're trying to do with natural flood management. So the answer is yes. But again, similar to I think I said to Councillor Totty, these are not short-term measures. It will take many years to implement those measures, and for those measures to become mature enough to have a significant impact.
Good. Thank you very much, Dave. There are no other yellow hands up from the committee on this item, so I should just pause and see if any non-committee members would like to say anything, or the relevant cabinet member, in which case no. So Dave and Dave, thank you very much indeed for that update, and Dave Edwards and your colleagues for coming last time. This won't need to keep coming back to scrutiny, because no doubt you will of course be updating the communities, the statutory bodies, Bewdley Town Council, the flood groups, and indeed ourselves of progress. And we do indeed await with interest and hope, in anticipation that we will get those permanent defences, and hopefully the July event can take place physically. And I know that Councillor Edgerton-White and other Bewdley Town District and County Councillors who've taken a very keen interest will want to participate in that in their own way. So if members are happy, I shall conclude this agenda item. And Dave, you're very welcome to stay for the rest of tonight's very interesting meeting, but we will not be offended if you want to leave. So thank you both very much for your time.
Thank you, Chair. And just to reiterate, we are and we remain extremely committed to getting that permanent scheme at Bewdley delivered. So it is an absolute priority for us.
I think the residents of that area will be delighted to hear that phrase, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
both.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
very much, both.
Thank you. Good. And in terms of agenda item 7, just for any late arrivals, I explained that because we don't have a cabinet member for highways appointed yet, they plan to be able to attend at a future meeting. No discourtesy to obviously the meeting tonight. And that takes us on then to agenda item 8, which is on page 31 of the printed agenda, which is the health and wellbeing plan update for our action plan for 2021 to 2022. Our principal health and sustainability officer, Jenny Morton, is with us. So if you want to unmute and turn your camera on, we'll happily hear your presentation, Jenny, and then can we take questions afterwards? Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My camera doesn't seem to be functioning, but hopefully you can hear me okay.
We can hear you, so at least talk to us.
Yeah, I will. Okay, so this report is to update members on work to improve health and wellbeing in Wyre Forest, and to seek endorsement of the new Wyre Forest Health Action Plan for 21-22. So the plan aims to tackle key local health priorities such as obesity, physical activity, preventing alcohol harm, and mental health and wellbeing. So activity in 2019-20 was obviously different to originally planned for obvious reasons. Some of you will worked with Rachel, who's our public health practitioner, who we normally work closely with. She's been seconded from her usual role onto the local outbreak response team, so we haven't been able to deliver as much as we would have hoped. The report includes examples of some of the work we have been able to deliver in 2019-20, so I'll just run through some of those. So we weren't able to run our planned volunteer fairs for obvious reasons, but we did assist the County Council in the Worcestershire Here to Help scheme, which was set up to support people during the pandemic by promoting voluntary opportunities, encouraging volunteers to sign up and linking volunteers with local voluntary sector organisations. So 183 Wild Forest residents registered as volunteers with Here to Help, and 813 requests for help were received in Wild Forest, and that was around things like accessing food, collecting prescriptions and mental health and wellbeing support. A local suicide prevention group has recently been set up linking to county-wide work on this topic, and some of you I think here tonight will have taken part in the recent suicide prevention training that we organised as well as part of that that work that's going on locally. Continuing on the mental health theme, tackling social isolation, we had to move our Showcase of Services event online. So we had a week of promotion on services for older people across the week, all took place online. And just to mention as well that the People Like Us Plus scheme is now up and running. So that builds on the previous reconnection service that members might be aware of from previous reports. This is open to anybody aged 18 plus registered with a Worcestershire GP who is experiencing significant loneliness, and offers support to those people. And that's also had good uptake, over 200 people accessing that so far in Wild Forest. In terms of physical activity, one of the things that we were able to do was to support the Ready Steady Worcestershire scheme, which promotes food and activity support for families over the school holidays, and that is ongoing as well. And we also worked with a range of voluntary sector organisations disseminating government COVID funding for food and other essentials during the pandemic, and provided information on mental health and wellbeing support available as part of that as well. We continue to work on other local priorities such as improving thermal comfort, so all the sort of work on energy efficiency schemes and so on that we do, tackling fuel poverty and associated health problems, and also around homelessness prevention. So going forward, Appendix 1 shows the draft health action plan for 2021-22 for your consideration. It outlines our planned activities, building on the work that we have done previously and linking to the current public health priorities. So we're asking you to either to recommend to Cabinet that the action plan is approved as per Appendix 1, or to put forward alternative or additional proposals to recommend to Cabinet.
Jenny, thank you very much for that. And of course, we must all remember that it's Mental Health Awareness Week this week. And indeed, there's been quite a bit in the media about that, and more important than ever, because of the pandemic and how it's affected people. I've got a number of speakers to comment or ask questions, and all ladies. Councillor Susie Griffiths first, then Councillor Tracy Onslow, then Councillor Karen Edgington-White. So Susie, you're first into bat.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Jenny, for such a comprehensive report. Just wanted to thank you, Elaine, and sort of Nikki for all the work that I know that you've done tireless work sort of promoting the mental health and wellbeing agenda. I've got a couple of questions, but mostly observations really. And Kate, sorry, I forgot to say to Kate, it's really good to see that sort of 100 people were taken in sort of homeless or rough sleeping in the Take Everybody In, and that you've only got 6 in emergency accommodation, which is wonderful. My main thing that I wanted to say, which has always been something that I've firmly sort of believe in, and one of the passions is mental health awareness. Just this week I've heard of somebody else I went to school with, the third man I've heard who's taken his own life since Christmas, including a young lad who took his own life. So I'm really interested to see this week in the government report from we had the government report that basically said that they are putting in a lot of money into mental health and well-being within schools. As you know, as your suicide prevention group, you've got Rob Collins and his family, and I'm very happy to see that you've got Mitch's Law within the suicide prevention agenda. What I wondered was, I did mention it probably about a year or two ago in the last meeting, that it's notoriously hard to get suicide figures in our area. I do believe we've got I don't know if we're any huger problem in the Wyre Forest than anywhere else, but like I said, from personally knowing 4 people since Christmas, I know Simply Limitless do amazing work, but it would be nice to see if we've got more provision that maybe could set up a group, especially for men. Don't know if that would be something that could be looked at within the cabinet, but I've waffled my way through this, but I just wanted to say, really, I think key things for our schools is with this government legislation about putting mental health and well-being into schools, we really need to try and get as much support into schools for our young people as much as possible. But I'm sorry I've waffled, but I just want to say thank you so much. It's been a hugely busy year for you all, and you've just done the most incredible job in supporting everybody, raising awareness, and just to say thank you to the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. And I don't think you have waffled, actually. I think you've made some very valuable and important contributions. Jenny, is there anything you wanted to add or comment upon?
Just really that, as Susie has said, this is really a sort of is really a big priority in Wyre Forest, and we've been doing a lot of work with different voluntary organisations, particularly more so over the past year. It's been in relation to the pandemic, but we are, they're all saying to us that they are more and more concerned about the mental health issues, and wanting to work with us as well, more on the prevention side of things and looking after mental health and well-being. So we are trying to push that even more if we possibly can.
Great. Just to pick up one point that Susie said, I think finding it hard to get figures, I think that's what Susie said. From when I was cabinet member for health and wellbeing at the county for about 5 years, and so there was a county-wide strategy. Off the top of my head, the figure was broadly tragically about 50 suicides a year across Worcestershire, and I think that could be broken down, well, clearly it could, to district by district. So those figures must be out there, and whether I think it might be county that have got the statutory duty to collate those figures. So those figures are somewhere. And am I right in that, Jenny? They will be published somewhere, and there are subgroups of the Health and Wellbeing Board that have district reps that will be able to have access to those. Am I right in that?
Yeah, that's correct. And Public Health now have somebody that's specifically focusing on sort of suicide prevention work as well. So that team will be drawing out the figures and sort of delving into those figures a bit more deeply as well, to look at the sort of different groups of people that are most affected. So we'll get hold of those figures. And
am I right in saying it's still roughly about 50 a year, or as a result of the pandemic, has it shot up, or is that data not yet out?
I don't know that we have that data yet.
Okay.
But we will endeavour to get hold of the data, as soon as it's available, and we'll report that.
That's helpful. Is that okay, Susie?
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Tracy Onslow.
Oh, thanks very much, Chair. Thanks for that, Jenny. I just wondered, because I was very sad to learn that the sport officer had been made redundant, and I wonder if that has affected this programme at all, and if it has affected the programme, what's being done to mitigate that? Because obviously he used to run a lot of courses for certainly the disabled people, so I was particularly sad around that, but I just wondered if it affected your programmes. I'm not sure how closely you guys work together, and if so, what's being done about it?
We haven't included as much around physical activity in the programme, that being one of the reasons. I say we've carried on with some of the activities around sort of walking and cycling and so on that we've been doing over the years, that in my team we tend to lead on. But with with the loss of the sports development. I don't know what's going to happen to take that forward.
Right, okay, so there's probably a gap there then, isn't there, now that I'm just thinking particularly around the obesity, it's quite difficult to deal with if you haven't got the activity side of it, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and I mean there's a whole range of stuff that could be done around obesity. And last year we were starting to do some work on that, but that was particularly with sort of public health practitioner that we work with was going to be leading on that, and that was one of her sort of specialisms. So obviously she's not been able to pick that up, so we haven't included it this year because it's not realistic for us to be able to deliver that this year.
Oh, okay, thanks, Jane. Perhaps one for the cabinet member then. Thanks.
Okie dokie. Thanks, Tracy. Councillor Edgington-White.
Thank you, Chairman. One or two things based. Thank you, Jenny, for the report. Very detailed and very useful. Appendix 1, as you're saying, it's going to Cabinet, and I'd like to just sort of run through a couple of things on Appendix 1 as to whether it could be things could be amended or cross-referenced. Just picking up on what previous two speakers have already said, I wonder if we can flag up to Cabinet that we need physical resources, perhaps more staffing to be allocated towards developing some of these features. The main questions are, following up what Councillor Griffiths has said, mental health, men and young people. We've got here that we've got a mental health day to promote in schools with children, not until February 2022. And I think we need to be looking at that in a broad way. Chairman has already mentioned the things about suicide, and I wonder whether mental health information and awareness should be cross-referenced with COVID recovery, which is page 43, because on page 43, COVID recovery is much more about food and activities, and it doesn't cross-reference mental health. We all know that that's going to be a feature, but if the mental health could have a prompt to say that the mental health situation related to COVID recovery as well is something that we need to cross-reference. The other point, to save going backwards and forwards, so that's cross-referencing. Yes, I mentioned staff resources or resourcing, but the other two things that I picked up very briefly, again, one is the cross-referencing, walking, we cross-reference with obesity and physically being more fit. And the other one is the active travel. Sorry, I'm flapping my papers around. It must be very irritating and noisy. The active travel on page 41, about cycling and active sport. The thing that I was wondering there, lead organisation. On some of them, we've got lead organisation and we've got mention of Worcestershire County Council. The active travel, I very much think that should be some sort of partnership with Worcestershire County Council. And I don't know, Jenny, if you wanted to comment on that. We've got the Wi-Fi Cycle Forum, but that doesn't seem a very robust part of the plan when we're relying on very much a very solid and very good third-party organisation, but there's no reference to lead organisations. And if you could just comment on that, is that the way we should go forward, or should we have lead organisation perhaps with Worcestershire County Council and ourselves through our green panel?
Okay, thanks, Khan. In fact, Kate's put her hand up, so I think Kate Bailey, our Head of Strategic Growth, might jump in and answer some of those points first of all. Kate.
Thank you.
Sorry, I do apologise. Just trying to get my mute off and my camera on. Yes, Chair, thank you very much. I mean, this is obviously a Wyre Forest District Council plan, and we've been very keen on the part of the officers to make sure that the objectives in there are either officer-led, you know, as in Wyre Forest District Council officer-led, or a partnership that we sit on. So whilst we recognise obviously the role of other statutory agencies have in some of this work, we've tried only to include in the action plan things that are within our gift to deliver on or within our control. So I'm not sure if that kind of helps Councillor Edgington White's question. And also, if you don't mind, Chair, I was also going to just mention we have been given the opportunity to bid for some COVID recovery money through public health, and we have included in there a bid around supporting young people in COVID recovery for every district in the council, in the county, sorry. So we will update members, obviously, if those bids are successful. There's quite a lot of mental health focus in there, both on a county level, all 6 districts have put in bids around that, and also on a Wyre Forest specific level. And my third and final point is we also fund Night Stop. We do a huge amount of work in the schools, so that's the 11 to 25 age group, around both counselling services and just general mental health and support work. So there are things happening in the schools, and hopefully, fingers crossed, some more to happen if the COVID bid's successful.
Thank you, Kate. That's very helpful. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Kate. Thanks, Councillor Edgington White. Councillor Anna Lewillier, good evening. You're next.
Thanks, Chair. It's nice to know somebody can pronounce my surname. Thanks, Jenny, for the report. It's very comprehensive. I wanted to skip back, if I may, to the activity subject. I think Tracy has possibly covered part of what I was going to ask about. But I was thinking about the summer holiday activity programs that have run so successfully in previous years. You know, I know as a parent that my children have greatly enjoyed them, and it's been wonderful to see sort of fairly large groups of children going and engaging with those. And I think it links in so strongly with mental health and general well-being. And at a time when the schools aren't open and the children don't have access to the regular PE, the break times, that interaction, and could potentially, and probably like my children, just be stuck at home on the computers and gadgets for hour upon hour. Does the Ready Steady Worcestershire plan have the means, facilities, or aspiration to go further than, I mean, the website looks really nice, and it highlights where you could go to take part in specific activities that you might be interested in, but it's channeling people out to other organisations. So sorry, I'm getting waffly now. What I suppose I'm saying is are we going to have any sort of central funding where we can have that responsibility and organise those things ourselves as an outlet for our young people? Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, Jenny, can you answer whether effectively whether we'll get some money at source and it'll cascade down from the county, or whether it's going to be done centrally?
We don't have any funding ourselves to deliver activities, but at county level, let's say through Ready Steady Worcestershire, they receive government funding. And then it's a case of organisations sort of bidding into that and setting up the activities and so on. And then those are promoted through Ready Steady Worcestershire, and that is something that's been building. And we're trying to, you know, it's getting an increasing number of hits and entries on the website and so on, as you know, as we go through each of the summer holidays. So it is something that we're trying to build, to keep building up. So it's a case of getting those activities in place and then promoting them to people in the district.
So Jenny, when you, just as a supplementary to Councillor Lewillier's question, when you say organisations to bid in, providers, for example, like Kidderminster District Youth Trust, who provide positive activities, they can bid for funding, and other such organisations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they have done. Yeah.
Okay, and they have done. That's excellent. Great. Okay, there's no other speakers from the committee. Councillor Nikki Martin, who's the cabinet member with responsibility. Good evening, Councillor Martin. Please do turn your video on. Feel free to make any comments, and whether you want to pick up anything that Councillor Onslow said, because she did say a question for the cabinet member. So you're here, so here you go.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, firstly, I'd like to thank Jenny and Elaine for the excellent work that they've done during the last year. I think it's been unprecedented, and I'm sure all the committee members know that. The mental health is always an important issue, but more so last year, and also in going forward, because unlock isn't as simple as unlocking everybody, and I'm sure you already know that. Just picking up on a couple of points. Rachel, Cocaine, Jenny and myself, we'd got an excellent week organised. We were organising what you call the like encouraging children to walk to school, and it was the I'm sure it's called the bus walk. I'm sure Jenny will
walking
correct me.
Yeah,
but unfortunately we were locked down, so that couldn't happen last May. It is something that we will continue to look at, because as a district, I'm sure you know, we do have issues with our children and obesity, and that is something that we really want to look at. We've touched on the suicide, which again was important, A, because of lockdown, but B, because, you know, we don't want any of our youngsters or adults, anybody in the district, feeling that suicide is the only way. And then also, just to pick up on Khan's comment about the active travel, we have an excellent relationship with the Cycle Forum and Dr. Prince and his members, and we're doing an awful lot of active travel within the district. You've got Silverwoods. We've also in the middle of with County Council, the support of the County Council, widening the towpath along the canal between Stourport and Kidderminster, and we continue to explore any new planning applications that we can put in, any cycle routes through that avenue as well. And so I'll just pick up on Councillor Onslow. Forgive me, Councillor Onslow, what was your question?
Oh, thanks. With your indulgence, Chair. I was just asking, because I was really sad to learn that the Sports Development Officer had been made redundant, and he obviously ran a lot of courses, particularly for disabled people. So I just wondered how it's affected this programme, which Jenny answered to say, yes, it had affected the programme, and therefore what was going to be done to mitigate that. And I think also he used to put on some of the courses that Anna was talking about through the summer programme as well. So it was what was going to mitigate that.
Yeah, we will do our best. Again, as Jenny said, a lot of this is about bidding for money, but also it is about getting the communication out there to let agencies and support networks know that this fund of money is there. So that would be my best answer for this evening, Councillor Onslow. But if you wanted a more in-depth answer, I'm certain that I can put that in writing when I increase my own knowledge around that.
Thanks for that, Chair, and I'll do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Are there any, I can see no other yellow hands, so I take it there aren't any other comments or questions, in which case, page 35 of the report, options 4.1, we either recommend the strategy as printed onto Cabinet, or indeed we put forward any alternative proposals. Personally, I think the strategy is a good and sound one, and I can see Councillor Susie Griffiths' yellow hand is up. Are you going to move, Susie?
Oh, no, yeah, very happy to move, but just wondering, rather than change it, could they just include what you said about finding out the suicide figures within the suicide prevention?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, happy to move, thank you.
Happy to move as is. Okay, great. Do we have a seconder with a yellow hand? Perfect, Councillor Edgington White, thank you very much indeed. So it's been moved and seconded. Is the committee all agreed? Good.
That's
I can
all
see
agreed,
11
Chairman.
hands. So, Louisa, that looks like unanimous, unless you're going to tell me otherwise.
No, that's correct, Chairman.
Good. As printed, the strategy as is, on to Cabinet. Excellent. Thank you very much. Jenny, thank you very much for your assistance. We will not be offended if you wish to leave the meeting now. I know that Kate will stay also for the next agenda item. And it would be helpful if I looked at the right agenda, because I was just looking at the April one for a moment, momentarily, because it got the flooding report in it. Good. Agenda item 9, Kidderminster 2040, a town centre vision. We have had the report sent to us separately, and I'll hand over to our Corporate Director, Economic Prosperity and Place, Mike Parker, who will talk to us for a few minutes, and then we'll take questions all at the end. Thank you. Mike, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. So this is a report that proposes the adoption of a vision for the future physical development of Kidderminster Town Centre. And you'll see, I hope members would agree with me, the importance of having a vision. And I've mentioned in the report, as a reminder, some of the things we've already done. We've got a very good track record of doing this, back to 2009 when we adopted the Rewire initiative. More recently, the adoption of the vision for the Eastern Gateway, we now know as Lionfields, and some of the vision work that we've prepared around what I know as Lionfields Phase 4, which was the one creative piece that showed how we intended to connect Bromsgrove Street car park with Worcester Street. But believe me, having that vision, being able to demonstrate that we know what we want to achieve, and indeed taking the initiative and doing some of the things we have done, some of the public realm works in the town, the demolition of the glades, examples like that. It's absolutely priceless when it comes to attracting additional funding and being able to base a good comprehensive narrative when you're making bids for funding. And I can't give you a better example than the award of the Future High Streets Fund money. All of the background we were able to provide there in the business case, going right back to Rewire, it gave Ministry of Housing and Local Government absolute confidence, I think, that we were an authority that know what we intend to do. We could demonstrate we've done a lot, and it makes it so much easier for them to buy in to that whole journey that we're on. And that award is the biggest we've had, the most transformation we're likely to see in Kidderminster for quite some time. So having a vision for the next 20 years might seem like a heck of a long time away, but actually a lot of the initiatives that we've seen coming about, it's a kind of 8 to 10 year programme from conception through to delivery. If you think about Churchfields, for instance, that was something we adopted a vision for in 2012, and we've only just delivered it. So if you took a shorter period, then chances are it wouldn't be a vision; it would become much more of a master plan. And let me just distinguish the two. This isn't meant to be a prescriptive plan for specific pieces of land within the town. This is high level direction of travel. And if you have a good look at some of the images around the vision, some of the sites there would look very different than they are at the moment. And this really is the opportunity to set our direction of travel rather than be specific about the future of sites. That's the next phase. That becomes the piece of work after this, where we start to get prescriptive about sites. And indeed, this will become then the background for the next local plans, not the one that we're about to adopt, but the one after that. So this is building for the future. And that 20-year period, if you think when we're adopting the local plan, the minimum for that is a 15-year period. By the time we're looking at the next local plan, it will coincide with this. So it does seem like a long way away, but it takes time to bring a lot of these visions to fruition. Now, some of you will indeed may well have completed your own surveys or taken part in some of the workshops that we undertook at the back end of last year. That was run by Hemingway Design, a multidisciplinary partnership that we appointed to help us with this vision. And indeed, the original conception of the need for a vision was part of an initiative that we were invited to bid for through the Greater Birmingham Solihull LEP back in early 2020. They ran what they call their SEP, their Strategic Economic Plan Enabling Fund, offering the opportunity to bid for CCORN funding for some of their towns and local centres initiatives. And indeed, that's what we were successful with. And what prompted that was really the kind of self perspective on what would our response be to the question, well, what's the council's vision for the town centre? We got some individual projects, but we hadn't really got that overall vision. When you think about the footprint of the Swan Centre and the Rowland Hill Centre, large indoor shopping centres, question mark, are they going to be fit for purpose over the next 10 to 20 years? That's what prompted the bid that was successful to look at the future. That was before COVID, and of course we all know the impact of COVID on town centres. They were already in decline. It's been accelerated. I think it's causing us to have to think differently about how we think about the future of town centres. And indeed, pre-COVID, I think we were all probably being sucked into demonstrating the same resolutions that we'd always been used to for town centres. And indeed, one could argue that's how we got ourselves into the town centre problem in the first place, because reliance on multinationals isn't going to be the way forward. So this piece, when we commissioned Hemingway Design and their colleagues, became even more important in the light of the future of post-COVID world. So that workshop and survey work at the back end of last year provided the foundation for what I think is a very well integrated vision here that is based on the outcomes of those surveys. And you'll see there were kind of 6 local priorities that came through that survey work. And they've marshaled them around the headings of process, place, people and purpose. And I think it gives us a very good platform going forward for future development opportunities. As I mentioned, the local plan, but we're also in the thick at the moment of being invited to bid for what's called Levelling Up Fund money, again, another government initiative. By 2023, once the current European funding programme comes to an end, we'll be looking at what's probably going to be called the Shared Prosperity Fund. So what we're talking about tonight will become the foundations for work and bidding for funding over the next 3 to 5 year period and beyond. So what might seem like a distant way away at the moment will quickly come around once we start using this document for those next most important bidding rounds. And indeed, I mentioned earlier the Future High Streets Fund. That's relatively short term. They're interventions in the town, specific interventions, so we've got to deliver by the end of March 2024. They're embraced within this document, so it recognises that that's the realism of what we're trying to do at the moment, but it's about taking us beyond that. What comes next after we've delivered that? So hopefully members will understand the importance of the vision, and hopefully you will agree with the direction of travel of it as well. It seeks to highlight some of the assets that we perhaps have overlooked and not respected as well as we might have done previously. The waterways in the town, the opportunities for the green corridors in the town, the connectivity between different parts of the town, and indeed, one of the next big challenges we're going to have is how we deal with the partial ring road. It prevents a very physical barrier between, the Horsefair area, the Compton Hill area, and the town. So, there are challenges that we're going to have to tackle going forward. But I think this vision does exactly what I hoped it would. It gives us the foundation for the next steps. It highlights the importance of what we're trying to do in the town. And I'm sure it will provide an excellent basis for going forward as we develop all of those future master plans and local plans. So I'll say no more, Chairman, but obviously, as always, very happy to answer any questions the members have got.
Thanks, Mike, for that high-level overview. First into bat is Councillor Tracy Onslow.
Oh, thanks, Mike. And I think it's excellent. And you're absolutely right. When I remember when I first came onto the council versus now, the number of things that have happened, with Crown House and development in the town and Worcester Street, and And I know it's had a big hit recently, but when you think back, it was drastically different to how it is now, and the outline areas. So that's all credit to you and your guys. And I was very pleased to see in the plan that the wall, the retaining wall on the ringway was in there, because obviously I've had some involvement with that recently. So pleased to see that in there. Just one point on it's page 14 of the document, continuing involvement. It says, verify with the college that they are up for this shared approach. I just wondered if we knew if they were or not.
Yeah, the answer is yes, and let me explain. I should have said, actually, although this is almost a complete document, excuse me, it needs a little bit of finessing and fine touching. What you see here is that very bit of finessing. The college are absolutely on board with this, and the new principal and the vice principal want to make sure the college are that they play a much stronger role in the future of the town than perhaps they have hitherto. So what we're going to do here in the final version is make sure that we've got a page that reflects their input into this vision as well, because this isn't just about a vision for the local authority to use. This is a vision that's going to be important for all of our stakeholders to use. So the town council are very supportive of this, for instance, but equally the college will be, and whatever arrangements they want to put in place to help support their future development, I would like to think that they will also be able to rely on this document. So it's got wide buy-in to it. And that little aid memoir there means that we've just got to get the college's final input into this document, but they're very, very happy to do that.
Oh, brilliant. I'm glad, because they're a big employer and they're a big draw into the town as well. So, yeah, fine. Thanks for the explanation.
Thanks, Tracy. There are no other yellow hands up. So, Mike, I don't know whether you've stunned everyone into silence. Perhaps I'll just fill in case anybody else wants to ask a question and comment and say, from someone who's been around even longer than Councillor Tracy Onslow on this council, economic regeneration is a slow burn, and doesn't seem like 5 minutes. I think I was deputy leader at the time back in 2009, and Nathan was in the cabinet. Tracy might even have been in the cabinet in that sort of time, where we had the rewire vision. And you look how long it's taken, in that 12-year period to get Crown House demolished, the Churchfields development, look at all the work in terms of what we want to do in Kidderminster. And it's only as a result of the Future High Streets Fund and the £20.5 million grant from central government that actually is going to make that happen and enable us to, purchase land in that area and regenerate it and redevelop it. And, look at the former Glade site, and potential bowling alleys and cinemas and all the rest of it and these type of things. It takes a huge amount of time, and and I can see I've got a yellow hand now, but just by way of comment, when I said to Mike, about the 2040 vision, some people can say, well, that's forever. What are you doing now? But we've got to have a vision, and by having a vision, we get the LEPs to assist us with funding, we get the county council to assist us with funding, and we get other grants. And because we had the right vision for Kidderminster, hence we got the Future High Streets Fund money, and the 10-year plans fit underneath it. But I think it's right that we demonstrate to our communities out there, what the vision of Kidderminster can be. And if we thought our high streets were dying pre-COVID, well, they can no longer even be resuscitated, frankly, can they? They are dead, and they are going to need to be shaped for, the next 2 decades and future generations of our communities. And I really welcome this report as a high-level document. I think it's really, really helpful. That's my contribution as chairman, and I filibustered long enough that Councillor Susie Griffiths would like to make a contribution.
Sorry, yeah, all it was. Thank you, Mike. This is very exciting. I just wish we could fast forward already. Having a bit of a social media break at the moment, but it comes up weekly, doesn't it, about our town centre and what's happened to our town centre. And I think people don't accept or sometimes realise that this is reflective of everyone's town centres at the moment, with the charity shops and everything else. I've been into town twice this week with one of my young people from work, and it's wonderful to see independent shops starting to come back. It's lovely to see the town is starting to come back. And I'm most excited here and looking at the Worcester Street steps, and I'm just wondering, sort of timescale wise, I know you can't say, but what will be first in the plans by way of priorities regarding our town centre? Do we know what is likely to come first? What development might happen first? Sorry if that's a daft question, but I'm excited about the Worcester Street steps, not that I'll be doing aerobics on them.
No, not a daft question at all, and that's really where I would point you to the Future High Streets Fund. That whole bidding process was premised on three very specific proposals, and you'll start to see coming out a whole communications plan, because we recognise that we need to begin sharing what the Future High Streets Fund is going to be about. But essentially, Councillor Griffiths, that was three elements that aimed to improve the connectivity between the western side of the town, Weavers' Wharf, and the eastern side of the town, by way of the former Crown House area and Bullring. So part of the what happens next, and by the way, the next is that's all going to be completed by the end of March 2024. So a very tight programme. So what happens next with that area? It needs to be transformed into the gateway that we wanted to see, that brings people into the town from Weavers' Wharf. You know, we all know the problems with Crown House. The opportunity now is, how do we create that gateway into the town, creating public space, you know, creating development opportunities. We want to look at opening the river up, the concrete slab that's over the culvert, you know, does that get taken up? Does it get built on? And then if you follow the route then up High Street, then the next phase is tackling a lot of the Worcester Street properties that are, you know, no longer fit for purpose. They're large, they're never likely to be used as high street properties. They're riddled with asbestos, being very honest with you. Chances are the market tackling those are very, very slim. So that's where the Future High Streets Fund proposes acquisition of a number of properties and demolition to create the Worcester Street steps, as you've described them. Opening up then the access to the Bromsgrove Street area and Lionfield, so it brings that area of the town much more into the town. We all know, you know, the difficulties and the obstruction that step entry provides in connecting Worcester Street to Bromsgrove Street, and then further in that connection across to the former Glade site, where we've got a separate developer agreement with Caldwell to bring forward our aspirations for a cinema-led leisure scheme. But then tucked over the back of that, the final element of the Future High Streets Fund is to completely refurbish, part demolish, part new build the former Magistrates Court building as a new creative stroke innovation hub, where we've got some very exciting partnership opportunities there to really start to make a mark on the town that hopefully gives it a bit more of its USP, which I think has always been missing in Kidderminster, but also then we start to see delivered out through other elements of the vision. So if the future of Kidderminster is to become, you know, the creative centre of Worcestershire, let's embrace that throughout other parts of the town. It's not just about being in the former Magistrates Court, it's about embracing that elsewhere. And if you'll be very familiar, I'm sure, with the Town Hall project. That absolutely plays into what we're trying to do across the rest of the town, and it will become an integral part of developing the town going forward. So I think in the immediate future, and I mentioned the Town Hall there, I think there are some very strong plans to be able to deliver that. But those three elements of the Future High Street Fund, I think, are the first things you'll see. But a slight note of caution there, where it's the old swan sailing across the surface at the moment. We might appear to be doing that, there's not a lot going on, but we're paddling madly underneath, because we've got to get a lot of work in place before you start seeing things physically happening in the town. So I think the physical works you'll start to see probably from next year, definitely 2023, 24. But to say that belies the fact there's a heck of a lot of work going on at the moment to make sure that we are able to deliver those projects. But they're the things I think you'll begin to see happening over the next 3 to 5 year period.
That's brilliant, Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you for your help as well. Thank you.
It's okay.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Nathan Desmond.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, everybody. Apologies, I was slightly late. Unfortunately, it was the traffic coming into Kidderminster this evening caused by Hoobrook Island. So I absolutely blame the relevant county councillor for that particular area who has started that project. But first of all, congratulations to Mike. I think this is an outstanding document, really. Obviously, I've read it from cover to cover, and I think it is highly exciting. I'll start off by saying that I think it's fair to say that we, and when I say we, I mean the Wyre Forest District Council, I think we do economic regeneration exceptionally well, and have done for a number of years now, and that is absolutely down to Mike Parker leading the charge, leading the drive and the vision, and imparting that knowledge onto his team. So, Mike, you have done a fantastic job. Obviously, I've worked with you exceptionally closely, since I was in the cabinet back all those years ago, 2004, and seen, your excellent work on the ground with Rewire, etc., Crown House, Lionsfields now, and other major projects you've been involved with. And obviously, this is, a further massive step down that very long journey, that we've all been down. And if there's one thing in particular that those members who have been on this council now for many years, as Councillor Hart alluded to, then economic regeneration is one of those slow burners. You can have the best vision and the best intent and the best, drive, but unfortunately the plans, can only be developed largely with private sector money, coming on board, and with government money as well. And, some of those plans and visions, have been slow to be developed. And, the factors outside our control, quite frankly. But, you are right. You need a vision, first and foremost, the foundation that everything else gets built upon. It is the gel, quite frankly, that will bind everything together. And I think this vision, I think it's invigorating, it's exciting, and it does what we want Kidderminster to become, quite frankly. And that is a unique destination. We all know that town centres up and down the country, if you read Kidderminster Matters or Connects, whatever it's called now, those people think that Kidderminster is the only town in the country having its own problems, quite frankly, and they, think it's unique. Well, we know different, don't we? That, Kidderminster is symptomatic of other market towns right across the country. Unfortunately, we've seen with, the onset of the internet, people are not going to town centres as a destination for shopping anymore. The internet, is largely taken over, exacerbated, as we know, by COVID. So therefore, we've come to a crossroads, nationally and locally for our town centres. We're at a crossroads now, and hopefully this document now takes us over the junction and further down that, road of reinvigorating Kidderminster. And what I like about it is I think it ticks a number of different boxes, because we all want Kidderminster to be different. We all want, Kidderminster to reinvent itself and have that sort of creative feel to it. Independent shops, the independent cafes. I love that cultural space, having more public art, and enticing the young back, into the town centre. Because if you look at the surveys, those, under the age of 30 aren't coming into the town centres. Those young people under the age of 40, sadly, I'm not classed as young anymore. But we need to get those, back into the town centre. And, with the college being in the town centre, there's a great synergy there that much more can be done. Having much more living space in the town centre is so important, which will also create that, dynamic space, but also good for community safety as well. So overall, I do doff my cap to Mike, as I have done over many, many years, a great supporter of Mike, and this is an outstanding document that I urge us all to support.
Thank you, Councillor Desmond. There are no other contributors. This is really exciting, and I don't wish to be flippant in saying I don't know whether I still want to be on this council in 2040 to see it come to fruition, or whether I want to not be on and look from the sidelines and see what everyone else has delivered. And we'll certainly be inviting Mr. Parker back in 2040 to see what's being delivered, because it really is a long burn. So I think that is very positive contributions from everyone, and certainly overwhelming endorsement of the strategy. But we do formally have a recommendation on page 5, which is either at 5.11 to recommend the strategy as is, or indeed any alternative recommendations. And Councillor Onslow's hand up is first, and then Councillor Desmond. Tracy, what would you like to move?
Yeah, very happy to move the recommendations, Chair. 4.1.
5.11.
Oh, sorry, I've looked on the wrong page. Sorry, yeah, thank you.
You've always been off the wrong page, Tracy. Councillor Desmond, your hand was up. Are you, Councillor Totti is now. Are you happy to second?
No, I'm delighted to second,
okay,
Chairman.
all right, perfect, thank you. Good. In which case, can I see a show of physical hands? Good, indeed. I can say that is unanimous. All 11 hands are raised, and that will go on to Cabinet to recommend the vision as is. And just bear with me while I look at the agenda. It's agenda item 10, which is the work programme on page 44. Can we just note that, if everyone will nod at me or wave at me? Good, excellent. Agenda item 11. Press involvement. Well, obviously we keep that under review, and if there's anything interesting, I'm sure the press will pick it up, or we can issue a proactive press release. I can say at agenda item 12, there is no other business to consider, and agenda item 13, therefore no need to exclude the press and public, and agenda item 14, just to say that there is nothing else, and I can therefore conclude the meeting. Louisa, that's correct, isn't it?
That's correct, Chairman.
Yeah, okie dokie. Good. In which case, thank you all very much for your attendance and good humour, and thank you to Mike and indeed Kate for staying to listen and support in respect to that presentation. And it's 19:32 or 7:32. I'm mixing my my clock. It's been a long week. So with that, very good evening to everybody.